Missteps in onboarding are becoming one of the biggest reasons that top talent leaves early. Why do you think this issue of onboarding gone wrong is so prevalent today?
For one, more of the interviews are done virtually. Not only are you not making those human connections as much, but I think that there's also less upfront investment.
Do you have 3 onboarding actions that you think every hiring manager should take before a candidate even starts?
I would say whoever the onboarding point of contact is, make sure that they are responsive, transparent, detail-oriented. The other bit I would say is make sure that
And 3 or so that they should take within the first 90 days.
1, make sure there is somebody checking in really regularly from both a personal and professional angle. The second would be
In today's job market, hiring isn't the hardest part. It's keeping your best people past day 1. While this may not sound like it'd be a common issue, it actually is. A recent study published by Onboarder found that 20.5% of HR leaders reported that up to 50% of their new hires left within the first 90 days, and 61% of HR leaders say early turnover has actually increased over the past 12 months. As roles evolve and candidate expectations sharpen, missteps in onboarding are becoming one of the biggest reasons that top talent leaves early. The first 90 days isn't just a critical window. Recent data suggests it's increasingly a failure point in many organizations across industries. I'm Paige Carlotti, filling in for Jesse Scaff, and this week I'm sitting down with Christine Corson, Managing Director of DSJ Global, the supply chain talent brand of Faden International. Christine has over 10 years of experience helping some of the world's largest organizations build and scale their teams, making her the absolute best person to share practical strategies on how you can build stronger foundations for your team from the very start. All right, so Christine, my first hard-hitting question for you is why? And not just why is this happening, but why do you think this issue of onboarding gone wrong is so prevalent today?
Yeah, I think that there's a few reasons for it. And I definitely think that the onboarding process, or I guess the amount of time that a candidate is willing to stay in a job, maybe before looking elsewhere, has changed a lot in the last few years since COVID and since the hiring landscape and hiring processes have changed so dramatically. For one, the interview process has changed in that more of the interviews are done virtually than previously. So in the past, if you wanted a job, most of the time you had to take time off of work and take time to commute into the office and carve out a whole day to meet the group. Now it's a matter of, okay, I'm going to book my calendar for an hour, do a virtual interview. Not only are you not making those human connections as much, but I think that there's also less upfront investment, which maybe makes candidates feel a little bit less connected to it. I also just think that there's options. Everyone is constantly online. People are, speaking to colleagues and engaging in their LinkedIn network, and there's just more opportunity for people to look elsewhere.
That makes sense. So it sounds like, one, applying to jobs is just easier than ever. It's right at our fingertips, especially with AI and everything. And on top of that, too, the casual, or I guess as a result of that, it's become a lot more casual, too. And that makes people feel maybe a little less committed to what they've actually just signed up for.
Yeah, absolutely. Applying, networking, interviewing, all of it is easier and faster than it was before.
That makes sense. And so are candidates leaving on their own volition, or are they being asked to leave from the employer due to misalignment? It didn't actually end up being a fit, or what are you kind of seeing in that regard?
Yeah, so I definitely think that it's a combination. I can speak from the area of the business that I oversee, of the candidates that we had either not start in their position over the last 12 months or leave during their guarantee period. 28% of those actually took another role. So in a lot of that was the main number one reason why candidates were leaving in, within the first year, within the first few months on a job, was they ended up taking another role. I think the underlying layer of that is, in a lot of those cases, candidates were required to relocate and maybe given some time to relocate, do temporary housing, this, that, and the other. And ultimately it didn't check out. I do also think, though, that employers are being really selective about who they hire. And if there are only so many resources to go around within a team, as far as headcount addition investment in recruiting through a firm or an agency like us, and they're being held to really high performance standards, they don't necessarily have time to mess around if somebody is not working out. So I do think that there are certainly organizations and teams and departments where they're just making quicker decisions.
That makes sense. And I know this episode is primarily about onboarding, but are you seeing mistakes that hiring managers might be making like before the person even starts that maybe is kind of impacting what we mentioned earlier, like people maybe not feeling quite as committed? And how can that kind of impact the candidate's overall experience?
Yeah. So I do think that the candidate and the employee experience starts with the interview process, because prior to somebody coming in and walking through the door, that is the impression they have of the organization. So when you think about things like whether or not they're accepting a counteroffer or whether or not they're going to continue looking for new jobs before starting this position, if they had a poor interview experience, they're so much more inclined to do that. So, what mistakes are hiring managers or employers making? I think long pauses or lags in feedback. So, you know, candidates are reasonable. They understand that a hiring manager or a team might be traveling, they might have a project that they're working on, they might have a deadline. But at the same time, everyone can take 10 minutes to drop a note and say, hey, don't have feedback for you yet, but this is the reason why we're still considering you. This is what next steps would look like. Or they could book next steps further out in advance just so they have something locked in with that candidate. And I think, yeah, just being accessible during that process as much as possible, or having somebody else from the team or that company stay in touch.
That makes sense. And that's crazy that it's not enough for employers to just hire someone. It's like they also have to give them, or not just give them a job, but also give them reasons to not leave that job. Nobody's safe, it sounds like. That's crazy to me that people still look even when they're employed. Because a lot of times people, I mean, it's like an ongoing joke, right? That like looking for a job can be a full-time job. But I guess that doesn't stop some people. So good for hiring managers to know. So are there any signals during the first, say, 30, 60 days that suggest a new hire might not be working out, might not last, or isn't really being supported?
Yeah. So obviously there are two sides of this. There's the performance side and the evaluation from the employer side. And then there's also the candidate experience side of this. So I think if we were to start from the candidate experience angle or candidate engagement, I think that some signs that maybe a candidate is not fully bought in, or a new employee, I guess I should say, is not fully bought in, would be just a general lack of engagement. So ideally, when somebody joins a team, and I know every function and personality is different, not everyone is going to be the life of the party or super social or anything like that, but you do expect there to be some sort of a level of excitement, engagement, and curiosity. So a new employee should be asking questions, taking advantage of networking opportunities, trying to get the lay of the land, and taking a really active role in their new job. I also think, to my point on relocation being a little bit tricky sometimes, I think if a candidate is several months into the role and it sounds like they haven't taken steps to relocate or move their life, so maybe they're in temporary housing and they haven't even looked to buy something more permanent or put their old house up for sale or anything like that, those could be good signs. And then obviously, like, life happens. People can take time off of work and that's totally fine. But if you do notice that maybe they're cutting corners, they're not putting in a full day, they're taking a lot of time off, and maybe there's not a good explanation for it, I think that could be a good indication that their engagement is a little bit lower. From the performance side, I think that just as much as, it's just as much as employers need a target and a benchmark to measure people against, I think that in order to be successful, employees need to have something to work towards. So I think it goes both ways. So as an employer, I would expect that your expectations for a new employee within the first 30, 60, and 90 days are really clear. The employee needs that to work towards, but also the client needs that to measure somebody against. So I think if you have that, you can tell from a performance perspective as an employer, okay, is this person working out? Are they moving in the right direction? Because we've had that conversation. They know what's expected of them. and they're still not getting there.
That makes sense. You can't just go off vibes. You actually have to have
Exactly.
measurable goals, exactly, and benchmarks. That makes perfect sense. Do you have any recommendations on how early or how often managers should be checking in with their new hires, or anything you from the recruitment standpoint?
Yeah. So I do think that for the first few months, I would say first month in particular, and then you can stagger it out. I would expect somebody from the team in some way, shape, or form, whether it's the direct hiring manager, a colleague, a stakeholder, a peer, to be checking in just personally, socially on, hey, how is this going? How are you finding things? And again, I think there's the personal angle of, are you happy here? Is this what you thought it was? But then there's also the performance check in that you can cover from both sides of, okay, this is what we needed to get done this week. This is where we're hoping you would be. Are you here? If not, why? Is this on us? Do we need to give you more resources? So I would say in the beginning, probably, at minimum a weekly check in, and then you can kind of stagger from there. But I feel like it feels a bit more organic, and also you get more perspective and probably more information if you have different members of the team reaching out. So whether it's you as the direct line manager, again, colleague, the talent acquisition person or HR person that brought them on, or us as the recruitment firm, we can have some pretty candid conversations with them because we're not their direct employer. We're a third party, so they may be a bit more transparent with us. It's good to have some sort of a regular check-in or cadence, at least through the first, 90 days and beyond.
If a candidate were to flag that maybe they're not super satisfied, what do we typically do with that information? Would we go to the employer? Is it case by case? Like, how is that normally handled, and how do you support both?
I do think it's a little bit case by case. So we ultimately, our goal is to make sure that our clients feel like they got the service that they paid for and that we were meant to provide them. So ultimately, it is on us to a certain extent within the agreed period, I guess I would say, to make sure that the candidate works out and the candidate is happy there. So I think that it depends on, we don't want to betray a candidate's trust if they give us something personal that's going on with them that they ask us not to disclose to the employer. We'll toe a delicate line of, hey, maybe worth checking in on so and so to make sure that they are okay with the position, with living in New York, whatever it is. If there is feedback for the employer, whether that's the hiring manager or feedback on the onboarding process or whatever it is, we do try to deliver that to the client in a respectful way. And then ultimately it's up to them what they want to do with it. But obviously it's a team effort. And maybe if this candidate feels some type of way, they feel like it was difficult to, you know, get on board into the company, or they feel like there was no communication, or they feel like they don't know what's expected of them. Maybe other people are feeling that way as well. And it could easily be fixed with a couple of conversations before we even get to the point of, someone looking for another job and ultimately leaving.
Exactly. That makes perfect sense, and is another benefit to having you guys on the team, and why we refer to you guys as truly consultants, not recruiters, but you're consultants. You help both parties. You coach them through what are sometimes those difficult situations, so that's definitely a massive benefit to both the employers and the candidates. Do you have, say, 3 onboarding actions that you think every hiring manager should take before a candidate even starts, and 3 or so that they should take within the first 90 days? Things they can kind of check off their list, and, should anyone drop or find the opportunities not a fit, they can say to themselves, I did everything I could to keep them engaged, keep them here, keep them happy.
Yeah. So I would say before a candidate starts, I think that the first thing would be make sure that whoever is handling the onboarding process, whether it is the HR business partner, the talent acquisition manager, whoever the go-to point of contact is for that candidate, is responsive. And I would say responsive, number one, but also supportive. It can be kind of a difficult time when either you've accepted a job that you're really, really excited about, you're just hoping everything works out and you can start. Or in some cases, people resign from their jobs and then they start the onboarding process. And when you're waiting to make sure that your background check and everything that you need to do has gone through and cleared, and that your job is still set and held for you and nothing is going to go wrong, when your potential employer goes dark, it can be really stressful, and that can create some scary thoughts, even if they're not necessarily there. So I would say whoever the onboarding point of contact is, make sure that they are responsive, transparent, detail oriented. The other bit I would say is make sure that, if possible, the candidate has multiple points of contact at the organization who are reaching out. So, line manager check ins are amazing because that's who they're going to be working directly for. And you want to make sure that you have that relationship. And ultimately, that's the buy in that they need. But if we can set them up on meetings with colleagues, or I know some organizations, they'll have somebody come to a happy hour before they start, or lunch, or an offsite if it's available. All of those are great options to just get more buy-in and make it feel a little bit more real. So I think those would be a couple of suggestions before the candidate starts. I would say once the candidate is already in the door, it's nothing groundbreaking. It's making sure that, employees feel valued and they have a good experience. But I think 3 suggestions that I would have: one would be, to the point I discussed earlier, make sure there is somebody checking in really regularly from both a personal and professional angle. So employees, I find, and in our experience, they don't want to be micromanaged necessarily, but they do enjoy having checks on how they're doing, and knowing what they're working towards and having their performance evaluated. So give them some updates on how they're doing so they don't feel lost. The second would be, I think that there are some organizations, and we have a number of clients who lean into mentorship really well. So if that's an option at your organization, get your new hire involved with a mentor and with the mentorship network. And then the third, I think, would be, where you can, if possible, try to create, cohorts or new starter groups, or sync employees up early on. I think that often new starters come in and they work in an organization for a while, or for a few weeks or a few months, and they have really exciting ideas about ways to make the organization better. Once you've worked at a company for, even a year, but 2, 3, 5, 10 years, you kind of get used to how things are. And sometimes we can develop a little bit of groupthink, but a new hire coming in is looking at this hopefully as a long-term workplace for them, or a long-term career. So they're probably thinking about ways to make things better, or improve the onboarding process, or improve ways of working. So tap into that. Let people share their ideas and feel like they have a hand in shaping culture.
That's great. And yeah, like you said, it's not groundbreaking. It doesn't really take much for people to do those things, and it can come to a really, really great benefit. So those are all great points. And I totally agree too. And I've heard so many stories about what different employers have done for people before they even start, again, to start building that loyalty, and just from a general human perspective, like not just doing it so that they don't drop out and then you have to go back to square one trying to find someone new, but just genuinely caring about someone, having a positive experience and what the life-changing decision for someone, or at least should be, when they get a new job. I remember when I started here, I started on a Monday, of course, and that Friday was the annual boat party. And one of the people who helped to hire me invited me to that, texted me that morning, was like, you should come. And I was like, well, I felt so, not, I felt weird, but I was like, oh, is that, I don't know anyone. Like, is that crazy? Okay, I'll go. I went, and it ended up, everyone was so kind. And it made my first day so much less stressful too, because I already had so many familiar faces. And again, to the point you're making earlier, I feel like, oh wow, like these people, first of all, they're real people, not just, because I actually hadn't met almost anyone in person, because a lot of them are based in London. But then seeing a bunch of people in New York office, I'm like, oh, this is a real thing. It took so much pressure off of my first day. And again, just made me feel like I have a job to do ahead of me, like it gets you excited, and like, yeah, it gives you a purpose to do your best and put your best foot forward and do a good job. So I completely agree. That definitely made a massive difference for me here, my own personal anecdote. All right. Well, I so appreciate your time on this, Christine. Thank you again, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Paige.
That's all for today's episode of Searching Smarter. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, keep searching smarter.